Today we're going to talk about migrant farm workers and what they do and why they're so important to us. So I invited Gabriel to come and tell us a little bit about himself. So why don't you go ahead?
Thank you so much. As you said, my name is Gabriel. I am from a tiny Caribbean island named Saint Lucia. I came to Canada in 2012 as a migrant farm worker. Presently, I am a former migrant farm worker, and I do a lot of work as an outreach worker with migrant farm workers. And also, I am an author just like you. Basically, my book is about sharing my experience as a farm worker in Canada, and I wish a lot of Canadians would read that story and understand the story behind the food that we eat. And the important thing is we are all connected by food in one way or another. And I wish Canadians would pay more attention and be more concerned about the food that they eat.
Good. All right. So what's your favorite food, Gabriel?
Being in Canada, for some reason, I always love mushrooms. Mushroom soup is one of my favorite.
Mushrooms are pretty good. And now, what kind of mushroom is your favorite? Because there's many kinds.
Yeah, there's so many kinds to be up to now. There's so many kinds. Every time I put my hands on mushroom soup, I always look forward to getting a different kind of mushroom. So I don't even know which one is my
Oh.
favorite because it's like a wide world, and I'm still discovering that wide world. It's like a continent, actually.
Okay, yeah, it is a wide world. I like portobellos, and I like for some reason I like truffle. I learned truffle is a type of mushroom. Like I like truffle oil, truffle anything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I think you've told me that in some ways a lot of the foods we eat are connected to the migrant farm workers. Can you tell me about that?
Yes, uh, generally, Canada is a very productive country. Canada produces a lot of fruits, vegetables, a lot of foods, and because it's a lot of work, a lot of hands are needed. And the kind of work that's involved in the production of food in Canada is generally considered to be D work, meaning it's dirty, it's difficult, it's dangerous work, and a lot of Canadians do not like to do it. They are non-unionized work. And generally, Canadians do not like to do it. And that is why one of the main reasons why the government have a program which brings in people from other countries, people we call migrant workers, to come and do those difficult work, dirty work, dangerous work.
D word. All the D words you said. I've never heard of the D work, the D jobs. That's really interesting. Um, and I was wondering, what word do you use when you talk about people who do the work, who come in from far away to come in to do this work? Can you say that word again, or that phrase of what you call the people who do that work on the farms?
Yes, in Canada, people come from because Canadians do not like to do the work. And therefore, it's called the dirty, D, difficult, D, dangerous, D, deadly. These are the dirty work, the difficult work, the dangerous work, the deadly jobs. The Canadians do not like to do it, and they bring in people from outside of Canada. These people, we call them migrant workers,
Migrant
migrant
workers,
farm workers, yes.
migrant
Oh,
workers.
and a few people call them guest workers, guests,
Guest workers.
like they're guests in the country.
Okay. And have you ever heard of the word agricultural worker? Also, is that agricultural migrant worker?
Ye-
Is there
Yeah, some people call them also agricultural workers, agricultural migrant workers. Yes, because agriculture is another word that is normally substituted for the farm.
okay, that's
Yeah.
right. So agriculture also means farmer,
Mhm.
farm work.
Mhm.
So I was wondering, you mentioned that you're from Saint Lucia. What is your life like there? Do you have a family? Or did you have a family there? And did you have to leave them behind when you came to Canada? I was wondering, you mentioned that you're from Saint Lucia. What is your life like there? Do you have a family, or did you have a family there? And did you have to leave them behind when you came to Canada?
Yes, in St. Lucia, I had a pretty stable family, and I had, well, at the time in 2012, I had one boy, a son, and a daughter. And at that time, their mom had passed. So I literally, I was a single parent during that time, and they were pre-teens. My daughter was 11, and my son was, well, he was a teen, early teen, 13. And that was a very difficult stage. I had to leave them, very difficult stage, because at that time in their life, that is the time when basically children go through that important stage in life, which we call teenage. We refer to them as a teenager, and that's an important stage in life when we basically children transition from childhood into adults. And I had to leave them at that stage, so that was a really difficult time to leave them. And the other important thing is, being a migrant worker in Canada, you're not allowed, you cannot bring in your family with you, and that was very, very difficult. In fact, it is the biggest headache, the biggest challenge that migrant workers face.
And how did you feel when you had to leave them behind? How did that make you feel?
I was broken in the sense that two things. One, I was broken because at the time, I was forced to leave them, not with a gun. I wasn't forced by way of a gun to leave them. I was forced because I was unemployed. I couldn't get work in my country because of difficult economic situation, or being unemployed, not having social support. So I was forced to leave my country to seek employment elsewhere. So that economic situation forced me to leave them. But on the other one hand, I was forced to leave St. Lucia. On the other hand, leaving my children behind, that was a very, very difficult decision, difficult thing. So I was torn. One hand is forcing me to leave, go and earn your livelihood. Another hand is telling me, stay back and stay with your family. So that was a difficult life I had. I was torn between, literally I was sandwiched between a rock and a hard place. Like, I have to leave for economic reasons. I have to stay to take care of my family.
You've also written a book, and so you're an author, as you have said. And what is your book called, and what is it about?
The book is called Harvesting Freedom. And what is it about? It's about the life of a migrant worker in Canada. And the name harvesting is an agricultural word, harvesting, and freedom is a social word, right? So it's the name of the book is very, very deliberate. And why it's very deliberate? Because the farm program, it started in Jamaica in 1966, and this year being 2023, is the 57th anniversary of that program. After 57 years, it isn't time to harvest freedom.
So, sorry, I just jumped in because you said 1966. So you're talking about the farm work program with Canada.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, I'm referring specifically to this one. Yes.
Yes.
And yeah, that's a good interjection, because we also had farm programs with the US and so on. They started at different times. Yeah, migrant work have been really something that literally, like, I would say, like, literally every generation of ours in the Caribbean are associated in one way or another with a form of migrant labor, for sure.
That's right. That's right. So what made you decide to write this book?
What made me to, well, a lot of things. I wrote this book. What kind of influenced me to write this book? A lot of things. Some of the things at the top of my head: one, Canada has 5 Ds. The 5 Ds of Canada I learned. Canadians generally are very good at denying it, that migrant justice and migrant justice and migrant rights don't exist. They're very good at denying it. One D is deny. Another D for Canadians, they're very good at downplaying it. Oh, it's not as bad as the US. Another D, they like to deflect the conversation. When it comes to, whenever we talk about a story, they like to deflect it or derail the conversation, or even delay that conversation about migrant justice. So that is one reason I wrote the book, The 5 Ds of Canada. Another important thing is a lot of Canadians are not aware of the migrant situation because we are made invisible, and we are made invisible in so many ways. We are not in mainstream media. We are not. Whenever I came to Canada, whenever we arrive, migrant workers arrive in Canada, is always under the cover of darkness. We live on the farms. We are made invisible in so many ways. So a lot of Canadians are not really aware of the situation, and that is by design because we are made invisible. Another reason why I wrote this book is because increasingly when I go to universities and colleges, increasingly a growing number of Canadians are trying to they want to be more concerned. They're showing more concern about where and how the food is being grown. They tell me, you know what they keep telling me? In Canada, it is legal for people to exploit the soil. It is legal for people to exploit the environment. It is legal to exploit migrant workers. And these people, they tell me they want to know that their food is being grown by people who respect the soil, respect the environment, and respect migrant workers. So that's another reason why I wrote this book, because the real story behind the food, the people who the people who plant, the people who package, the people who pick, the people who process, the people who prepare our meals, they are all people of color. They are all migrant workers, and a lot of people are not aware of that. So to expose that story, that is why, another reason why I wrote that book. Another reason why I wrote that book is because the book is important. Why? To let Canadians know that Canadians are not bad, that the politicians are not bad, that the farmers are not bad, but it's the government policies that are bad, and it's the government policies that needs changing. And Canadians need to be aware of that and to push their politicians, to pressure their politicians to create a fair system, a just system, by changing those unjust laws, those unjust policies.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I'm sure that the book you have written, it just came out in January 2023. So I'm sure that a lot of people will become aware of the living situation of migrant workers. I certainly, after writing my book, Malaika, Carnival Queen,
Yes.
And after I wrote the story, it had been in my head for a long time. And it was inspired by my 2 grandfathers, and one of my grandfathers didn't come home. So my mother grew up not meeting this grandfather. I never met this grandfather. I don't even have a picture of this grandfather. So this book is all dedicated to both of them, but the story is inspired by him. So what I'd like to know is, what did you do as a farmer? Or what was it like? What did you do as a farmer? And what was it like? Was it difficult? Was it hard? And why, if it was difficult, why was it difficult?
Beautiful. Yeah, being a migrant farm worker, for me, we did everything from planting the crop to harvesting and packaging the crop. And in the greenhouse where I worked, there are lots of different tasks. From the time you plant the crop to harvesting it, to harvest and packaging it, there are lots of different activities to be done. For me, my main activities were deleafing and picking. And I need to say, both being a migrant farm worker, both my living and my working conditions were very very difficult. In terms of my living conditions, I live in a bunkhouse with I lived in a bunkhouse with 62 other colleagues. Well, 61 other colleagues. I was the 62nd person. 62 of us.
62 in a
62
bunkhouse?
in a bunkhouse.
What is a bunkhouse? Can you describe it?
Yeah, beautiful. I can describe a bunkhouse. Yeah. A couple of things is a bunkhouse. Um, we call it a bunkhouse because the beds are bunk beds. What is a bunk bed? It's a two-layer bed. In my home country, it's only children who sleep in bunk beds. When I go to a Canadian home, when I go to a house in Canada, if there's a bunk bed in the house, it's only children who sleep in a bunk bed. But when I go to the farm, it's adults. Migrant workers, they put in bunk beds. So in our home countries, children sleep in bunk beds. In Canadian homes, children sleep in bunk beds, but on the farm, adults sleep in bunk beds. It's like they treat migrant workers is like they treat us as children. So we call it a bunk house because it is bunk beds that are in there. And on the farm where I work, there were 8 bedrooms. Each bedroom had 8 people, excepting for one that had 6. And in my room, which is the typical room, there were 4 bunk beds, and there were 8 of us sharing a room. In the kitchen, we had one communal kitchen, meaning everybody used the same kitchen. There were 3 stoves with 16 burners. So imagine 16 burners for 62 of us. So that means everybody could not use the kitchen at the same time. So for me personally, I had to get up really, really early because a lot of the guys, they like to use the kitchen. They like to use the kitchen at night. But me, I went to bed earlier than them. So I would get up earlier. So basically the kitchen was free very, very early in the morning. That was the way I was able to access the kitchen. And for me, being a farm worker, migrant worker, that changed my whole lifestyle because I had to get up early to access the kitchen. So my day started really, really early, and my living condition means not having enough appliances. Nothing was enough. No privacy, not enough appliances, not enough washers, not enough dryers, not enough for the number of workers. The ratio of appliances to workers were very, very difficult. So that made our living conditions very, very difficult. In terms of our working conditions, the basic laws that are there to protect workers in Canada, the laws that are designed to protect workers in Canada, migrant workers are excluded from those laws. And simple things like overtime pay, holiday pay, and so on, we excluded from those laws. In other words, what I want to tell you, DET, that is a migrant worker in Canada. DET. What is DET? We are denied a lot of things. From the Constitution of Canada, migrant workers are denied a lot of things. E, excluded. We excluded from a lot of things. The laws that are designed to protect workers in Canada, we excluded from that. And on top of it, we are tied. T is our tie. We are tied to our employer. We have a tied work permit. So let us go over that. Being a migrant worker means I am tied to my employer and denied so many things and excluded from so many things. So basically, being a migrant worker means that you're exploited, and the migrant farm worker program is a recipe for exploitation.
That sounds very sad and very difficult. And especially if you're also missing family members, and in a way you're tied to a situation where you're there to work, to provide money, to pay and support the family members back home. And in a way, it makes it a harder situation to be in, because you can't. Because some people say, why don't you just leave, or why don't you just quit? But it makes it harder to quit or to leave, because you also have the needs of a family to support back home.
Beautiful. And I would like to draw people's attention to life, LIFE, and death. DEBT. This is a documentary that was made in Jamaica,
Yes.
Life and Death. And it's important. That really spells out the reality of people in the global south, where that large divide between the developed and the developed countries. And because of life and death, we are forced to go through the fire. What do I mean by that? We are forced to go through difficult living and working conditions in Canada, because back home we have even more difficult situations where we cannot get stable employment to support our families. Difficult conditions back home forced us to come to Canada. When we get to Canada, we face even more difficult conditions. But will you speak up? Will you speak up and fight and stand the risk and face the risk of being deported, being sent back home? Where when you go back home, you're going back to a country where unemployment is very high and you still have a family to support. So we are literally forced to go through these difficult conditions. And I like to put it this way: we are sandwiched between a rock and a hard place. In our home countries, difficult conditions push us to be migrant workers. Come to Canada, difficult working and living conditions. So we are forced between a rock and a hard place. At the end of the day, knowing that we have a family to support, we want to know at the end of the pay week, the pay cycle, that we have money to support our families.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to compare that quickly to DDT. You know what Canadians said? We cannot deny Europeans' rights. We cannot deny them rights. We cannot deny them freedom. We cannot tie them to a farm. That's what Canadians said to Europeans, people from Europe. We cannot DDT. We cannot deny them rights. We cannot deny them freedom. We cannot tie them to a farm. But when it comes to people from the global south, DET. We can deny them rights. We can exclude them and we can tie them.
Mm-hmm. So where do the people that work on the farms, what countries do they come from?
Generally, we call these countries the global south. A lot of these workers are Spanish workers from Mexico, Guatemala, and so on. And a lot of the English workers are from Jamaica. Jamaica is the giant when it comes to the English-speaking workers. To me, I would say maybe 90% of the English-speaking workers are from Jamaica. Right now, the government of Canada, they've expanded the program, and literally a farmer can take workers from literally anywhere in the global south. Okay. And right now, it's not uncommon to hear workers from Thailand, from Cambodia, Vietnam. The program have been expanded greatly.
How many years did you work as a migrant farm worker?
Yeah, I did it for 4 years or 4 seasons. 2012, 8 months, go back home. 2013, 8 months, go back home. 2014, 8 months, go back home. 2015, 8 months, but then I applied to live in Canada.
Okay, so when you come here, then you're living here and working here for 8 months. Do some of the migrant workers stay longer? Do they have a longer work terms or shorter work terms?
Let me refer to the program that brought me to Canada. The program that brought me to Canada is called the Seasonal Agricultural Workers Program. That particular program started in Jamaica in 1966. Under that program, a migrant worker can come to Canada for a maximum of 8 months. Oh, some workers on that program, they can come to Canada for as little as 6 weeks. Now, pretty soon these workers will be coming to Canada. These workers will come for 6 weeks. They come to harvest apples, usually in the month of September, October. They come for 6 weeks to harvest apples. Let me compare. There's another program where the workers can come to Canada on a 2-year contract, and it's a slightly different program. So these workers, they work in Canada year round, and especially in the greenhouses where there's always work year round. It's very common to find workers who want 2-year contract.
And what kind of crops did you grow when you were on the farm, or what kinds of crops did you plant or harvest on the farm?
There were tomatoes and organic sweet peppers, and there were many varieties of tomatoes. Several, not hundreds. There were hundreds, different varieties, different colors, different shapes, different sizes, different colors. A wide variety, like it was like a continent of tomatoes. Lots and lots of tomatoes.
Yeah, I've seen one of the farms, and I know that those fields can be vast.
Yeah.
And what I was also surprised by was the fact that I always presumed machines did a lot of the picking, but because of the nature of the fruits, they can't be picked by a machine. They have to be picked by hand.
In the greenhouse, generally tomatoes, the way tomatoes they produce a whole set of tomatoes in a cluster.
Right.
A lot of tomatoes in a cluster, and all of the fruits, they do not ripen at the same time. And the way they harvest the tomatoes, generally, they would harvest ripe ones. So that is why manual harvesting is done, because all the tomatoes do not ripen at the same time. So you harvest them manually. So that is one reason why migrant workers are needed, because tomatoes do not all ripen at the same time, and they're harvested manually.
And what do you want young people, Canadian young people, to know, or what do you want young readers to know when they learn about migrant workers, either through your book, Harvesting Freedom, my book, Malaika, Carnival Queen, or even on the news, because there's been some more news recently about some migrant workers. So what do you want young people to know, and what can they do about the situation? So what do you want young people to know, and what can they do about the situation?
I want the young people to know that a migrant worker is a human being, and not just a migrant worker. The word migrant worker is a broad brush. A migrant worker is just like your statistic. A migrant worker is a human being. We have 10 fingers, we have 2 eyes, we have a family, we have a normal life. Being a migrant worker, it's a category. That's just a category. And what I want them to know about that category is, one, we are human beings. But being in Canada, we are not treated as human beings. We are treated as second class in Canada. We are denied a lot of things. In Canada, we are denied basic human rights. We are denied basic labor standards. So being in Canada, we are not treated as human beings. I want young people to know that. I want young people to know that the food that they eat, if they eat well, if they eat healthy food, that would in turn impact their health. And if they are not concerned about the food that they eat, that the food that they eat can also be a slow form of poison. What do I mean by that? People need to pay attention. They need to pay attention to who's growing the food and how the food is being grown. And the other thing I want young Canadians to know is that Canada is a champion for human rights. Around the world, people look up to Canada. Around the world, people look up to Canada. Being silent, it is not accepted. Being silent means that you're accepting the situation as it is. And the situation as it is not just. I want young Canadians to know that I am fighting for a Canadian food system that is healthy, that is sustainable, and that is just. I want young people to know and to be aware about the food and to fight for a Canadian food system that is healthy, that is sustainable, and that is just. And if you have a food system that's healthy, sustainable, and just, it is the foundation for a really, really bright and prosperous society. We cannot do without food. And even better yet, when you know that your food is grown in a healthy way, sustainable and a just way, that is peace of mind. And that food is very, very important. From now until we go to the grave, food will always be important. So work towards a food system that is sustainable and that is just.
Wow, that's really helpful for us to know some things that we can do and some things to think about. I would like to ask you one last question. How were you able to, because you live in Canada now, so how were you able to become a citizen or to live here? As I've done some of like my own research, I think there are a lot of migrant workers, not all, but some migrant workers actually want to become citizens of Canada. And I understand that's sometimes not very easy. That's sometimes very difficult to become a citizen. So can you tell me about how your story about becoming a Canadian?
Okay, a couple of things is one, the thing is that being a migrant farm worker, I've tried to summarize it by DET. We are denied so much, we are excluded from so much, and we are tied. In Canada, to access all those things that we are denied and excluded from and tied to the other way around it is to access to become a permanent resident or become a citizen. And to be a migrant worker means you're denied so much, you're excluded from so much. Is that the way life is meant to be? Is that the way we are meant to live? To live in a state of fear, in a state of hopelessness, or to live a life of freedom, a life of fulfillment, a life of abundance? And to access all those things is to apply for permanent residence. But in Canada, migrant workers is very, very difficult for migrant workers to apply for these things. I'll tell you why. Because the policies of the government, they put the bars, the requirements so high that the average person cannot meet the bars. You have to write an exam. You must be working in Canada year round. They make you must pay so much. They make it so difficult that it's very, very, it's out of the reach of the ordinary workers. For me personally, I could not apply under any of the ways, the traditional ways or the main ways people could apply to live in Canada. I could not. My circumstance was so different that I had to apply on the humanitarian and compassionate grounds. Very, very difficult ground. And what was my story? When I came to Canada, I had 2 kids. And they were without a mom because their mom had passed in 2005. So I have 2 kids without a mom, and now I am so far away from them in Canada, earning my livelihood. And that was the basis for my application. It was a very unusual, very extreme situation. And that kind of application is called a humanitarian and compassionate application, an H&C application. And that is very, very unusual, and that I would call it was just a crack that I was able to end. It was that crack that allowed me to put in an application. And that is not a very common thing or easy thing for other migrant workers.
I want to thank you so much. I learned so much today about migrant workers and migrant farm workers. And I'm wondering if you have anything else you want to leave us with today.
Of course. Now that I am living in Canada, all those things that I was denied of, now I can access them. All those things I was excluded from, now I am included. That thing that I was tied to, now I am free. Living a life of fear or living a life of hope. And Canada there is enough for everybody to live a happy life. There is enough. Canada is the second largest country in the world. Canada, we all know, is underpopulated. Canada produces a lot. There's enough for everybody. But because of unjust policies of the politicians, PPP, our poverty, P, is because of the unjust policies, P, of the politicians. And what I would like people to know, that there's power in our hands as a consumer, as a student, as an artist, whatever skill you have, there's power in your hands. As a voter, there's power in your hands. I want you to discover that power you have in your hands, to write your book, to sing your song, to do whatever skill that you have. Use it and push people to take action. That's why I'd like to thank you for this opportunity and also congratulate you, because you've used the skill that you have to create awareness and to bring awareness. When people become aware of things, their thoughts, their words, their actions can change. And that is the kind of change that we need in Canada. Canada can be a free country. Canada can be a better country. And we have the power to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. I have two small questions I just remembered.
No worries.
What did you do? What work did you do in your country? You said you weren't able to find a job in your country. So what was the work that you did in your country?
Before I came to Canada, I did many different kinds of work, but all of them, they were lateral jobs related to agriculture. Just before I came to Canada, I was self-employed doing 5 different things. I was a beekeeper. I was a shop, how do you call it? Somebody who operates a convenience store. I had a small greenhouse. I was a middleman. I used to buy produce from farmers and I used to sell inputs to them. 5 different things. And I thought my income was diversified, but doing those 5 different things in the countryside, everything was related to agriculture. So a hurricane really messed up everything, right? And I need to backtrack a little. I did many different kind of jobs related to agriculture. But when you go to the global financial crisis in 2008, the global financial crisis was one. We had the WTO ruling, we had black sickle infestation, we had varroa mite infestation in beekeeping. All of these, it was a series of events that really forced me to a difficult situation, and the hurricane literally was the final nail in the coffin.
Wow! So all those things happened, and then, of course, your wife passed away, and that added more all these hardships all at once.
Yes, like a domino effect.
Domino effect. So, what do you do? What's the work that you do now in Canada?
I am an outreach worker. I serve migrant workers, and even right now, today's payday, I am in Simcoe. I serve a lot of migrant workers. Being a migrant worker means you do not have the same rights as a Canadian. It means that you're vulnerable. I want workers to read that. 3 words I want to live. Vulnerability. I want vulnerable. Understand the meaning of vulnerable. Understand the word denied. To be denied, and understand the word transformation. To transform somebody's life who is in a vulnerable situation. These are 3 words I would like to leave the viewers or the people who are within air reach. So 3 words I would really like you to focus on. There's not enough time that you can understand that somebody is vulnerable, somebody is denied so much, and to transform that person's life. Yeah.
Okay. So when you work with these workers, do you bring awareness to them, and do you connect them to things that will help them as well?
Exactly. Empower them as much as possible. And the other word I forgot to include is dignity, right? To do all of that with some element of dignity. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And thank you so much. I think I'm going to stop here because
this is a never-ending conversation.
Yeah, it's a never-ending conversation. And I think the next thing is, I know that you have a book I would love to read. I have a book I want to share with you. We're going to do a book swap. And what we do, I'm sure we're going to both have more questions to ask each other.
Absolutely.
But my hope is that, I grew up here in Canada, and certainly we learn about farms. We have Trip to the Farm. Farms, I also am an educator. I've taken kids to the farms, and not one of those trips involved meeting a migrant farm worker, learning about the migrant farm workers who come from the Caribbean, which is a country where my family's from. And a lot of the kids I work with and teach, we don't learn about that. So
invisibility is one word. They make us invisible, and the whitewashing of
That's right.
And that's the point too, right? Whose story are we familiar with? Whose story? Is it the victor or the victim? And very few, and that's what you try to do. Hear the story straight from the horse's mouth. Because whose story to wear is always somebody else's story, and never the victim's story.
That's right.
And that's the important thing. That's what I want Canadians to do, to take a side. Take a side. Do not stay neutral. Take a side. The moment you get to know the facts, The moment you get to know the facts, you must take a side. And I know whose side you take, but whose story are you hearing? From what you know, whose story? Is it the victor or is it the victim's story?
That's right. Yes. Well, we want to hear all the stories, and that's why writing books is so important.
Exactly. And to tell only part of the story is literally lying to you. The story is complete only when the whole story is told, right? The whole story has been told.
That's right. That's so right. So thank you so much for your time today. I know you need to go. You're at work, taking your precious time to share with us. And we will definitely be back again to talk some more about your experience as a migrant worker and your books and my books. And I have so many more questions to ask you. So I'll save those for another day. Thank you again, Gabriel.